Okay, we're talking about some roster changes today. We're going to talk about NA and then we'll talk about some EU. So, Parabellum and Mirage are the two teams from NAL making roster moves. Some of the other teams could make roster changes, but all the other ones seem sort of unlikely. And also, it doesn't seem like these two teams will make any further changes, or can make any further changes. So, my understanding is that you can only change two players between stages, but between seasons you can change like your whole team because of the franchising or whatever. But okay, so creators being dropped from Parabellum here, and we already saw Wimpy be dropped. We knew that was coming to some extent. Some people thought maybe they would change their mind and drop somebody else besides Wimpy, but no, they did let go of Wimpy in order to bring in Blaz, and now creators being dropped. It's unclear who is going to be replacing him, so that makes the roster 4 players: Blaz, Penguin, Eska, and Kool-Aid. And so we'll wait on the 5th. Between Parabellum and Mirage, some of the rumors I've heard are like Gunner, Asian, Prod, maybe even Wimpy switching from Parabellum to Mirage. Some of those are more likely than others, but all things I've sort of heard whispers about. Okay, so creators, he was on Tempo Storm a little while ago. Tempo wasn't very good, but he was probably one of the standouts on that roster. Then he was on Xset, and then he was probably still kind of one of the standouts, not as much as he was on Tempo, but he was decent. Maybe he was around average, I guess. Not their worst player, not their best player. And then that roster that got relegated, and now here he was on Parabellum just for the one stage. So it seems unlikely for a player that hasn't really seen any success on any team to get a 4th shot, especially consecutively. So maybe we'll see him go down to T2, do well, and then come back to T1. I mean, maybe he'll get picked up by another team, but I don't know what team would pick him up at this point. So just being on so many rosters, it seems like a little bit of a red flag. Do keep in mind, though, Tempo, he didn't really get kicked, right? The roster fell apart and the system changed, and the org left effectively. And so that fell apart. And then Xset, they got relegated. I don't think Creators was ever... Actually, he was sort of dropped, right? Because X had got their spot back, and then they slowly dropped other players. But I'd say effectively they got relegated, and he didn't really get kicked. And then on Parabellum, he does get kicked here, but it's after just one stage. It's really hard to judge anything, and really hard, I guess, to judge his performance in general. He just came on for the one stage, and I guess maybe he thought he would be on for more than one stage, but so he did only play the one, and he was brand new to the team. The other 3 members that I mentioned before, Penguin, Kool-Aid, and Eska, had already been on Parabellum, so they played together. Whatever, just a ton of factors. It is a little bit weird. Creators and Wimpy, not the weirdest thing ever, but they were 2 of their higher statted players. I think Eska was the highest rated, and then 2nd and 3rd were Creators and Wimpy, right around 1.0, with Penguin and Kool-Aid on the bottom. Do keep in mind, though, Penguin and Kool-Aid do play a lot more of the support-oriented roles, so a little bit surprising, but we will see who they replace Creators with. And Blaz seems like a really promising addition to the team, and then again, some of those other players I mentioned before could also make a big difference. Parabellum weren't terrible. They did take a few pretty solid victories, but they ended up in, what was it, like 8th or 9th place? I don't recall off the top of my head. Maybe 8th. But so, yeah, definitely a lot of room to improve, but they did show a lot of potential, and now with the roster changeup. Okay, so let's talk about Mirage now. So Thomas is dropped, and also I think they haven't done the formal announcement, but Razor basically has been dropped. And there's a ton of drama surrounding this. I don't really want to go into it. If you want to take a look, I mean, you can look at all of the Mirage players, current and former, their Twitter pages, but I suppose you could just go to the Reddit, the subreddit for R6 Pro League, and it's all pretty centralized there if you care to indulge in this sort of thing. So again, Thomas and Razor being dropped, a little bit surprising. I think they were the 2 highest statted players on the team, I believe. And do keep in mind, Marmalade and Melted on more support-oriented roles, so it makes a little bit of sense. And then I think Benji was dead last on their stats. Of course, Guerrero was the bottom, but he was the coach standing in, so that makes sense. Benji had a pretty dreadful season, or stage, I suppose, and last season overall, he didn't do too well. I think he had one stage where he was all right. It might have been that first stage when they had Hot and Cold on the team. And so Benji was supposed to be dropped, it sounds like, and then they changed their mind and went with Thomas, and Razor was supposed to be dropped the whole time. So yeah, Mirage, they're going to have to make some 2 pretty big pickups, and then probably also reorganize the team. Seems like maybe Benji and Melted's roles should be adjusted somewhat, so we'll see who they bring in to fill whatever roles, and then we'll see if those 2 players do change roles, and then I guess Marmalade seems to be on the appropriate roles, and her and Melted, I suppose, it really does suck for them that they haven't been given a solid shot yet, because they both seem like pretty promising players. And I guess that does it for NA. I don't think there... Oh, one more thing I didn't want to mention. I suppose these are pretty much all former XSET players being dropped. We have Razor, Thomas, and Creators, and then I guess also Wimpy. He's not an XSET player, but he got dropped a little while ago. So the three like new drops that we've seen are all XSET players, and so that means that the only XSET player left standing from last season, and that includes their players, of which they had more than 5 because they did make some roster moves over the course of the year, and then also their coaching staff. The only one left standing is Drip. He's on Beast Coast now. I think some people think he won't be left standing for that long, but I mean, it seems like he's not being dropped this stage, but well, still more announcements to be made. He'll probably stick around for at least one more. Beast Coast, I don't imagine will make changes. They showed a lot of promise, and they were fairly close to making the major, and so, right, yeah, all these XSET players being dropped, and maybe it's just a little bit of a curse, and well, probably also there is a reason XSET was a pretty bad team last year, unfortunately. And Jarvis not around. And also Drew Spark, I think he is still on XSET, but he's now the coach for Valorant. So a little bit of caveat there. Just something funny to mention. And, well, sad for a lot of the players, but just a funny little trend, I suppose. So let's talk about EU now. Moving on. Okay, so this is pretty exciting. So we sort of knew that these guys were all going to stick together. Joystick, Shepard, Dan, and always 4 players. They would pick up a 5th. And then Jekka, their coach. But it was unclear what they would be playing in there, because they did say that they intended to continue playing together. Because of the system that I talked about earlier, where you can only pick up 2 players per stage, I suppose they could be slowly implemented into a team, pick up 2, then pick up the other 2 the next stage. But it seems more likely that, well, because of this announcement, that they're going to be playing in like Challenger League and then try to just qualify for T1, even if they don't make it, which seems unlikely with how good of a roster they are, one of the best of all time. They'll probably make it, but if not, maybe one of the struggling orgs could drop their team and pick them up. NaVi, Secret. Maybe those teams won't be struggling by the end of the season, but we'll have to see. So anyways, they sort of teased who's going to be our 5th, but they did already announce it by the time of this video, and it is Karjeka. So he was on the roster before. He got replaced by, I think it was Always, right? So originally it was Joystick, Shepard, Karjeka, Shockwave, and Scyther. And then they replaced Shockwave with Dan, and then they replaced Karjeka with Always, and then they replaced, and now they replaced Scyther effectively with Karjeka. Scyther's still playing on Empire, or Pones or whatever, along with some other players, and I mean, they're pretty bad. I think a lot of people are saying it might be funny if these guys end up taking their spot in relegation. That would be a little bit poetic, and so we'll see. Yeah, I mean, it should be really promising. They haven't announced what they're actually doing or even a team name. I think they tweeted a little bit about trying to figure out what their team name is, so maybe they will get an org to represent them in CL, or maybe they'll just have to do it themselves and then qualify. So probably the earliest we'll be seeing these guys back in T1 is for Stage 1 of the 2023 season, so that's still a ways off, but I suppose they could qualify via open qualifiers for SI 2023, which is around the same time, but I guess it would be just slightly earlier than Stage 3, like a month earlier. Or, sorry, not Stage 3, Stage 1 of 2023. Okay, so yeah, be on the lookout for these guys. I probably won't be watching a ton of their stuff, assuming they're playing in EUCL, because I don't watch EUCL really. But maybe I'll tune into a few of their games to see how they're doing. Again, assuming they do play in that and not just like a T3 league, or something else crazy happens and they do end up in T1 earlier. And okay, I think that does it for these guys. So let's talk about the very last thing. I think this is actually the first thing chronologically, but I just threw it at the end. It's maybe the least interesting thing overall. So this is on Eminem's website. They didn't actually make the real announcement on Twitter. They just linked to this, so here we are. They are dropping their PM, their performance manager, Chicken. They had a performance manager named Chicken, I guess. And then they're dropping secretly from the roster, replacing him with Skitty. And I guess secretly, he wasn't performing that well. He's been playing the game forever. My understanding is that he was their IGL, and I did try to look around to find what Skitty's roles are, but I couldn't find real concrete information. I saw that he was on the Eminem Academy roster, so NaVi stays poaching players from Eminem and I guess now their Academy roster. But he played on that, and I couldn't find actual stats from their games to see what operators he was playing or anything. So if he is a fragger or something, which it seems like is maybe what NaVi needed, it is a little bit weird to trade out your support-oriented IGL for a fragger. But I also think maybe, say, Kayak could IGL or something. Maybe one of the other players is capable of doing it. Or maybe he is just a support player and he will IGL. It's not entirely clear to me. If you do know what his roles were before and thus what his roles likely will be, do let me know in the comments, and maybe other people can be enlightened via that. So, right, that does make the roster Blur, Nathan, Kayak, Thunder, and Skitty. And I think that does it pretty well for all of the roster moves. Some slots to be filled, certainly. Could be some exciting pickups if some of the rumors are true, and then maybe even we'll see some more NA drops. It doesn't seem terribly likely that any of the other NA teams want to make roster changes, but it is possible. And then EU, I think, has certainly more potential to make more roster moves. EUL, I mean, mostly because we've only seen the one change here, whereas in NA, I suppose we've already seen like 4 changes. So, yeah, I guess that's going to do it for the video. If you have any comments, anything to say, leave them below. Other than that, a like and a subscription would be appreciated. And with all of that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video.